Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the best films from the first 4 months of 2013. The reason I'm doing the first 4 months of 2013 rather than wait till half the year or something is it often feels like when summer starts, the first 4 months just kind of get erased. It's just a lot of the stuff in the first 4 months usually gets forgotten. So my cutoff really is Iron Man 3. Mud, which I reviewed but isn't getting on here, would be the last film I guess I saw of the first 4 months. But Iron Man 3, not that it would make it on here anyway, is kind of the cutoff. That's the beginning of May and thus the 5th month. So this is everything for the first 4 months. It wasn't the strongest first 4 months of any year I've seen. I think last year was a lot stronger, and I really regret that I didn't make a list like that then. But I wanted to get on with it, and I'm going to pick 5 films. There's a couple runners up, but I'll get to them at the end. The first film is Sound City. It is a documentary about the famous Sound City Studios, which recorded many a famous album using the Neve soundboard, which was specially made by Robert Neve, and Dave Grohl, who directed this film, bought the board and brought it to his own home studio. The documentary for 70 minutes goes through the history of Sound City to becoming what they're doing in the present, with them making this album with people like Paul McCartney and Stevie Nicks. And the way Dave Grohl directs this is kind of erratic. He kind of has a spastic energy to what he's doing. You never really get bored of it. You know, even though it is made in the typical documentary fashion, he does a fairly good job in keeping it actually pretty cinematic. They really tried to show me like why these people wanted to record on analog and their passion behind it, and their passion to playing this way, and their passion for creating art. It's really about them playing music and rock music, but even the enthusiasm that these guys fucking have for making music made me think about just making art and making your own shit, and that enthusiasm is kind of like infectious when it's at the end. It like made me want to go and do something creative after that. I mean, I'm making this video. I don't know if that's as creative to some people, but to me that's like I'm doing something creatively, and it like inspired me. It gave me like kind of a passion to fucking do it. It was a cool documentary because not only did he show the history of this studio and why the studio was so great, but he also showed kind of why all these people wanted to get into music. And I think in certain ways he shows that the board is important, but also that the human element is almost even more important. And the next film on my list is The Pirate Bay Away from Keyboard, a documentary about the trial of the 3 founders of Pirate Bay who were tried in Sweden for helping people infringe on people's various copyrights. And this is centered on the court case and the effect the court case has on their lives. It makes it look very draining. They seem a lot more optimistic at the beginning, whereas as the film goes on, they seem like kind of drained by it. They don't seem to have the same amount of enthusiasm they used to have, the same amount of fuck you to authority that they used to have. It almost reminds me of something like Zodiac by David Fincher, the way you see this investigation go on and like the toll it takes on the people involved. Simon Close made not just an important document, but a pretty damn good documentary. It's looking at copyright in the modern age and how things kind of need to change in terms of distribution and how we're going after these court cases. While watching this, it feels like the world just isn't really as there as we would like to project that it is. It's just, the world isn't there with technology. A lot of people don't understand technology, and this court case is a prime example of people and governments not being ready to change laws and adapt things quick enough for new technology. This is one of the best films about technology, mainly because it's a document of something that I hope in 30 years we'll look back on as completely ridiculous, even though at this time it's not viewed that way, unfortunately. The third film on my list, and these aren't in any order. The last 2 kind of are, but these aren't in really any order. They're just kind of random. The next one is To the Wonder. This is the latest film from Terrence Malick. It's very abstract. There's no real narrative story to it. It has less of a narrative story than I think Tree of Life does, and even the cinematographer Emmanuel Lubetsky said it was less tied to theatrical conventions and more tied to cinematic conventions. I somewhat kind of think I know maybe what it's about, but I might be totally wrong. And I was never sure while I was watching that. I kind of couldn't somehow figure it out, and I wasn't sure like why is Javier Bardem's character even in this movie. It's really about Olga Kurylenko and Ben Affleck. It's not really about
Javier Bardem. And I still don't really get exactly why Rachel McAdams is in this movie. It's a movie that requires thought process, and I think that's not something we get from a traditional narrative. And since this film has completely given away with pretty much all narrative, or at least in a traditional sense, it's really inviting conversation about it and inviting thought and critical thought, but also it makes for a really enriching film experience. Like, every time I see his films, it's an experience. I'm always like wrapped up in the film. Odd, surreal kind of movie that's both inviting and then evasive at the same time. It's like I know things about these characters, but then I feel like I don't know things about these characters. There's really no substitute to a Lubezki-Malick collaboration, because the framing is amazing. The way he can make even bed sheets look amazingly epic, but at the same time very personal and intimate. It's always great weeding through a Malick film and seeing what's inside, and not really maybe knowing what's inside, but trying to figure it out and experiencing it, for me, is still an interesting enough experience.
And now the top two, I think, are probably the two on this list that I'd say, no matter what happens this year, I'll still consider them two of the better films I've seen this year. They have the best chance of getting into my top 10 at the end of the year. I highly recommend both of them. The next one is Upstream Color,
the long-awaited second film from director Shane Carruth. This is much like Primer, and if you've seen Primer, you know that it's the kind of film you can't get entirely on a first viewing, and it's such a strange idea and concept for a film, but the way he photographs it and the way he tells it and the amazing sound design and everything. I mean, Shane Carruth basically did everything for this movie. He directed, he produced it, he wrote it, he's distributing it, he's acting in it, he did the cinematography, he did the music, he did everything. It's like kind of a crazed experiment. All his films, and including this one, have this weird DIY mad scientist kind of nature about them, and where in Primer you have the time machine in a storage space, and in this it's about this guy who owns all these pigs and is using these mind control. Each of the people who he puts the mind control stuff on is also kind of mentally joined with this pig in a weird way, and that character reminds me almost of Shane Carruth himself. They're these weird mad scientists, but in this DIY kind of post-internet age kind of mad scientist. This film is in advanced text. If you had trouble keeping up with Inception and you thought that movie was weird, you're about to have your mind blown by Upstream Color. This is a very unique kind of science fiction film, and in a time where sci-fi, it's mostly made to make blockbuster movies and big budget movies. You know, you don't see this kind of a voice behind science fiction. This reminds me of Rod Serling or The X-Files, well-crafted, smartly written science fiction that you can pour over and really go into and see throughout what's going on in it. And I think Shane Carruth brings that to science fiction. He's one of the few real original voices that I really find to be a challenging writer and director, and challenging in a good way. And there's a real fear of technology with Shane Carruth, you know, an interesting fear, an understanding fear, but a natural fear and a natural human element to why we should be fearful of that.
And the final film, and I think probably the film I was most impressed by and most interested in, one of the few documentaries that really makes me think about the genre and is testing the genre, and also because it's just a great movie, and that is Leviathan,
which is a non-narrative avant-garde documentary. It takes place on a fishing ship, and the directors decided to put various cameras throughout the ship, like kind of hidden and smaller waterproof cameras, so they can get weirder exact views of this fishing ship that you normally wouldn't see down in where they keep all the fish they've caught, like really right down with the fish, so you see like their bug eyes just like popped out from the pressure, and like through the perspective of the fishermen because they have a camera on their helmets. All the cameras are put in weird places, so what you're looking at isn't automatically recognizable to the eye. At the beginning, you see the ship and it's in this dark black water. I don't know how many of you have ever looked out at the ocean at night when there's no lights on it, and how much of a black endless abyss that it looks like, but it definitely reminded me of that, and how hopeless and inadequate and inconsequential I definitely have felt when I look out into the ocean at night. Specifically with this film is such a breath of fresh air with documentary. This is the kind of thing I want documentary to be. I want documentary to be weird. I want documentary to be different. I don't want to see the same fucking documentary every time. And like this film and like The Arbor a couple years ago have really come out and questioned what is going on in this dead stagnant genre. It's subject matter over filmmaking, and I personally like filmmaking. It reminds me of Stan Brakhage. It's like experimental film, and you're watching some of these images and you're getting right up close with the fish and with these fishermen, and they're like cutting down these stingrays at one point, and all the images I took away from it are so memorable, but there's no story, there's hardly any dialogue, and if there is, it's obscured by all these weird loud noises. It is very dark and creepy and weird and strange, but it's a film that you can really think about and take your own interpretation from, because Leviathan isn't telling you how to feel about these fishermen or the environment with these fishermen, and that you're left with just images. I mean, it's literally like stripping away everything from a documentary and giving you just filmmaking. Leviathan's the rare documentary that leaves me with faith in the future of documentary. It's one of the better art films of the year, but it's also one of the better documentaries that you will probably see this decade.
So those were my top 5 films of the first 4 months of 2013. I considered a lot of films. I was surprised how documentary heavy I was on this list, and because I'm not really a documentary person, they were all such good documentaries, specifically Leviathan, but Sound City I was surprised how much I like. Same with the Pirate Bay movie. The Pirate Bay Away from Keyboard is actually available on YouTube. You can torrent it. It's very easy to find for free, so you can watch it anytime you want. The other films that were kind of runners-up that I considered, I thought about doing like 7 films or 8, but I was kind of like the five I picked were kind of the 5 I felt the strongest about. I could have expanded it. 3 films I was considering were Stoker, Spring Breakers a little bit. I know a lot of people don't feel that way, but I really liked it as like a fun cultish movie. And then Room 237 I also considered, and they were all kind of close. Stoker got kind of disqualified when my wife was like, well, what was Stoker about? And I was trying to explain it, and I was like, wow, that movie was kind of dumb, actually. And that's one of the fun things in film, because you never exactly know what the year is going to be like. If someone had told me months before what my favorite films the first 4 months of 2013 would be, I wouldn't have expected I would pick 3 documentaries like I did, but that's what happens. Those are the films I picked. It was the climate that it was, and that's what I thought were the best 5 films. So if you have seen any of the films on my list of the best films of the first 4 months of 2013, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. For those of you who've been watching my stuff for a really long time, or 10 years in fact, I am kind of celebrating the 10th anniversary of my first cartoon, Cletus the Fetus, that's who this is. They're all on YouTube. You can check them out. It was just a cartoon I made in college. I made 88 episodes. It was well before Knock Force. I've never worn this shirt in a video before. It was the original Cletus shirt before the black one.